Hello again, my friends. I am again doing this series on the Yoga Sutras because it's a very important text about the human mind that we need to follow. It is one part of yoga. Understand that the Hatha Yoga, the postures, asanas, the mantra side of yoga, the breathing aspect, these are all separate parts of yoga. Different forms of yoga, all of which I teach 9 forms, which brings in a lot of different things, including yantra yoga that people don't know anything about generally, which is a very mathematical system like numerology, but ancient and probably the source of numerology. But anyway, the Yoga Sutras are about how do you deal with your mind? How does your mind work? So it would fall into the Jnana Yoga category, which is wisdom and understanding about ourselves. And this is what I'd like to elaborate on because I have noticed, again, I have been teaching yoga for 55 years or so, and I see that most people take to the physical and sometimes go to extremes of how to perfect a certain posture. But then after doing that, their minds keep on rambling all day long until you fall asleep at night, wake up in the morning, your mind is rambling. So the study of the Yoga Sutras is about that. How does your mind just keep rolling on? Why is it doing it? What are the functions of mind that create this phenomena? And that's really the essence, it's the foundation and essence of yoga, the whole idea of a mind-body connection. What is it? What is your mind doing? How does it work? So, in going to the sutras, one sutra at a time, I'll explain some of that from my experience from watching my own mind and also from observing other people who have minds that can't stop after years of practicing yoga. They still can't come to the meditational state. Now, meditation is a state of mind that is euphoric. It's called samadhi in the ancient texts. And this is a state of blissful happiness where your mind is completely peaceful and your feeling is blissful and happy and your consciousness is expanding into higher realms. So if you don't deal with your mind, you're not going to get to that place. You try, and what people are trying to meditate, so they're sitting, meditating. I know a number of people who've done like a vipassana and sitting for 10 days watching their mind, and the mind doesn't stop. So it's some of them can feel like they're going crazy sometimes. So yoga brings us the ability to stop the mind, bring it to a peaceful state in simple ways. Like when you're practicing a posture, you're feeling the body. As soon as you're shifting consciousness to feeling something, the thinking mechanism kind of subsides because you're not giving it attention. It needs to have attention to keep rolling, to keep piecing the ideas together into the fantasies and stories and one memory linking to another. So understanding how this works is an important part of our development in yoga. And that's what I'm going to be explaining in this series with the Yoga Sutras as the basis of how Patanjali described this process of dealing with the mind one step at a time, looking at each of the functions of the mind and being in the place of the observer, not entangled in the thought process. All of which, there are these techniques and ways of accomplishing this in yoga. And you need to practice it. And some of the things that are mentioned in the sutras is that you need consistent practice to be able to catch the mind. And you need a certain amount of discipline and effort to be able to do this. Like getting up early in the morning to do your yoga practice. It's not something that you do at 11 o'clock class in some studio. It's to catch the mind, you need to be up early in this position of the observer. And one of the foundations of the yama niyama, again, is the swadhyaya, which is self observation. I am the observer. I'm going to watch what happens to my mind and to my body as I'm practicing yoga. This is a very important aspect. If you're not watching and you're not aware, just physically, you can pull your body too far and rip one of your tendons and things. But if you're paying attention, you're observing, you notice, whoa, this is not feeling very good. Your body does give you the feedback. Now the same thing applies to your mind. You're practicing a breathing technique and you're looking at what impact does it have on the thought process or on the emotional aspect, which is totally interlinked with the thought process and connected to your body chemistry. The study of all these things and relations, it's actually fascinating and intriguing and interesting, and more interesting because with yoga you're learning to modify what's going on, to change the system, to change the way your body is taking the electromagnetic waves of possibility and molding them into your chemistry. A chemistry that creates higher consciousness, or a brain chemistry that goes into depression. You realize I can actually control this. And there are all these techniques. So this is what I do. I teach people about all this stuff, including all the physiological, the asanas, the postures, the breathing techniques, the health rules of what you should eat and how you should sometimes fast, all these things. It's all part of the whole system. But what I see, the missing part for the system in most people is contemplation. And it's this study of the mind. The whole Yoga Sutras is really contemplation. And contemplation is not interpreted out of the 8 limbs of yoga. There's a lot of mistakes in here in the interpretation going from the Sanskrit. And even the Sanskrit scholars I'm seeing, they interpret contemplation. Samadhi means contemplation, or samadhi means concentration, or it's the steps are contemplation, where you're studying the mind, concentration, once you have focused the mind and it's not distracting you, and then you go into the meditational states, when you concentrate on rising your consciousness into the meditation state, the samadhi. So these are fundamental tools, and understanding the tools and how they work one after another to bring you to this really a higher state of consciousness where you're looking around and everything is beautiful. It's like you're now sitting in paradise. So the talks are going to continue in this direction. And again, the sutras are one statement at a time. And you take one statement and you observe, is this true? Okay, the first statement in the Yoga Sutras is simply saying that this text is an explanation of yoga. And the Sanskrit word for explanation isn't just a theoretical explanation, it's an explanation with techniques. So it's seeing how the mind works and then using a certain technique to alter the processes of jumping, the monkey mind jumping from the past to the future, from memories to possibilities. So this observation and this translation of the Sanskrit text needs to be understood in modern terminology. The human mind is still a human mind. It has the same problems it had thousands of years ago. We just have different content, but the functioning of the mind remains the same. We haven't really changed the mind. The programs we put into our mind are different from culture to culture, from one generation to the next, from the newest, latest generation with all the technological information, IT stuff, to the basics of living a daily life and seeing how the senses are looking at information from around you, and then that's going in, cross-checking with your memory, and your memory then is projecting what could happen in this particular environment, and then seeing this mind game, and it interferes with your conscious awareness, of what's actually happening here and now. So we'll go into this one piece at a time, one statement at a time. I'll read some of my interpretations. Again, I have the book to go with this. The first interpretation I did was in 1982, a translation of the text after 10 years of yoga. And now, another 40 years later, I have a greater insight, a deeper understanding of the whole phenomena. I have been watching my mind for all of these years, daily. And I get up early and observe as the mind is starting up in the morning. Most people get up a little bit late and the mind is already running and rambling. That's already too late. Anyway, we'll cover all of this piece by piece. Thanks for listening so far. See you soon. Now, as I started saying about the sutras, each statement is a fact, a realization, something to be observed in the context of your own mental processes. It's a guide through your own mind. So as we began with Artha Yoga Nu Sasaram, meaning this is an explanation of yoga. Now the explanation, the word explanation in Sanskrit includes an instructional aspect. So it's explanation with instructions. It's not just a philosophical text or an idea of how things are. It's look at this, observe your mind, and then we'll explain how we can change the situation when it's going negative. How do we stop the ongoing thinking of the mind? So the next statement is a well-known, many people quote this, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This is observing the mind in its actions, its modifications. The word modification is often used. The modifications of the mind need to be stopped. Essentially, this is what Patanjali is saying at the beginning of the Yoga Sutras. Understanding these modifications and learning how to stop them is really what the rest of the book is about. And I say book, but really the Yoga Sutras fits onto 2 pages like this. All of the sutras. They're simple. This is how it is. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So you need to look at this and understand in depth what it means. Stopping the modifications of the mind is yoga. Or let's say you achieve yoga by stopping these modifications of the mind. So modification, I would say the activities of the mind, the programmed activities that go into how the mind is always judging things, comparing things, assessing, coming up with possibilities, reaching into memory. These are all different activities of the mind which then are working together to create your mental turmoil or the days on end when your mind is thinking and you're just following the mind, wishing it would stop, leave you alone, go to sleep. Actually, the reason we go to sleep is just to get out of this whirlpools of the mind. Whirlpool is another translation of modifications of the mind. Chitta. Mind activities. So understanding that these are ongoing activities of the mind as your processor that is taking information of what you see, what you hear, what you feel, what you taste, what you smell, and what you think. Processing all this information into a picture of reality that then is what you are experiencing. And most of you probably know by now that all living in our age of science and scientific research that what you see isn't exactly what's out there. Your eyes are taking pictures, and the information of the pictures is coming as electromagnetic waves of light, different colors, etc. And then your mind is taking this information, which is from the electromagnetic world, and going into impulses in your nervous system, and then changing that into an image of what seems to be out there. It's a picture in your mind that you see when you're looking out. The picture is not out there, it's in your mind. So this mind thing, this processing of the mind, needs to be understood in its details. And Patanjali goes on from this to explain the details of these modifications are like this. This is what they do, this is how they work. The next statement then is saying, Tada darashtu swarupa vastanam, which I'm not going to read all this in Sanskrit because I'm not really a Sanskrit scholar. I have a certain vocabulary understanding of many different words in Sanskrit, not so many, but an in-depth understanding because I've been observing what it's really talking about for a long time. So he's saying here that consciousness can then be in its own state of awareness if the mind has been stopped. If all of this modification, the activities of the mind, the judgments, the comparisons, the memory checks, the imagination, when all this has been stopped and out of the way, consciousness is there. And we call this being here now. Be in the moment and just observe the experience that life is giving us in this moment. It can be quite a bit richer. The colors are actually brighter, the sounds are more musical. Everything is more beautiful if you're not busy processing all the information and comparing it to all your past memories. And then the mind will predict and think about, create an imagination of where this could lead to. The present environment might be safe, might be dangerous. This is the first thing, the judgment of the environment. So we're going to go through the list of what he's talking about, one detail at a time, and you observe your mind to see, is this how my mind is working? This is the swadhyaya I mentioned. You are self-observing how your mind is functioning. And then you're seeing that actually these statements, these sutras, are a guide to see this is how it works. And you're observing, is this true? And you have a little bit of a guide for what you're looking for. And you see, actually, yeah, I'm judging many things. I'm looking at my environment and, well, this is a beautiful natural environment. It's like the Garden of Eden. I'm sitting under an orange tree and some of them could follow my head and I could eat others and make orange juice. Or I could be in the city where there's traffic rushing by and it's more dangerous. Or I could be in the jungle with the tigers coming up. So we judge the immediate environment as to whether it's safe or not. This is a primal instinct that we all do, and it's not necessarily that we're doing it consciously. It has become a subconscious program, just automatically is assessing the safety of our environment. And then as to whether it's pleasurable or not, this is another interpretation. Anyway, when consciousness is not entangled in all of that, you have this clear perception of the experience in the moment. The here-nowness of being in the experience 100% without comparing it to yesterday's experience. And this is a much richer way of living. It is living in the moment. And it brings up a sense of joy and peacefulness and the same enjoyment that a child has running around. A child doesn't have a lifetime's worth of memories to compare things with. A child is discovering everything in the newness, in the moment. And then there's nothing interfering with that. So there's a sense of exploration, a sense of wonder, children looking in awe at some magical thing happening in the sky, or a flower opening up, or a new creature crawling along the ground. A new experience. Not judging it, not comparing it to all your past experiences, because there haven't yet been a lot of past experiences in the children. So they're living much more in the moment. We need to learn from them how to go back to this place, not make them grow up into serious adults. So consciousness free is much more childlike. Standing in awe, experiencing everything, and the beauty of everything, the beauty and the magic of everything is still present. Then, as adults, other times when consciousness assumes the identity of the mental processes, this is the entanglement that we all suffer from as adults. When we're looking at a flower, we already know that it's a flower because we have the past experience, and we learn this is called a flower, this is called a rose, this is a daisy. Now this is not just the naming of it, but the naming of it brings up the memory and foreshadows what we're looking at, so that we think we know, and there's a bit of an imagery overlay from the past experience to the present, and we're seeing the true colors of the flower right now. We're seeing a reflection of it, colored and tainted by our past experience. If we saw this flower in a beautiful state of mind, in a happy situation, we see it differently than we saw this flower when we were in a frustrated, angry mood. The mood changes our perception, and the mood from the past will change our perception now and in the future. So this is one of the modifications of the mind, and we need to eliminate that so that we can actually see clearly. So when this consciousness becomes entangled in the mind processing, we lose the clarity of consciousness. That's essentially what he is saying here. And it's really true when you start observing your mind and how it works. I do have this written translation interpretation, again, that can go along with this video series. And in it I am saying and pointing out different mistakes we've made, like with this sutra of consciousness getting entangled in the mental processing. We have in Western psychology and philosophy, I think, therefore I am. It's a famous statement by Descartes hundreds of years ago, maybe 300 years ago. And that has tainted Western perception, and consciousness is already entangled in this, I think. I'm thinking, and I'm conscious of thinking, so that's what I am. And if you go to the East, it's quite the opposite. We are consciousness getting entangled in this thinking, and it's a problem. The thinking is a major obstacle to consciousness itself. And we need to realize that they are separate things. We can be conscious of an experience and see it in all its beauty and magic, or we can be thinking about it, analyzing it, comparing it to the past, and then it's not the same. We don't have the same experience when we are doing that. In my commentary on this particular sutra, which is the fourth sutra in the Samadhi Pada, which is the explanation of yoga, really, I'm pointing out that I saw this change back in the 60s when we had the psychedelic revolution, as it was called. And the psychedelic revolution was the introduction of psychedelics to a society that didn't know about these things. There are older societies that were very familiar with them, the ayahuasqueros of South America, etc., using ayahuasca, the peyote users in ancient traditions. Western mind didn't know about this. So psychedelics came up, and all of a sudden, the term blowing your mind out of the way came up. It blew my mind away. So the thinking process all of a sudden was out of the picture, and consciousness was seeing the colors and the beauty and all these things. The mind couldn't grasp it all, so it had to simply be out of the way. For some people, sticking to the mind and trying to figure it out was creating what they call a bad trip. If you let the mind go and see and experience, all of a sudden the colors got much brighter. The flowers were pulsating and radiating and had auras around them. So the young folks saw this and said, wow, this is amazing. I don't think I want to just go back to seeing in a normal way. I had a good reason to say that. The normal way was kind of boring and dull, and go to work all your life and forget about the fun you had when you were a child, become a serious adult. Again, we're losing our colorful conscious perception by doing this. So this began a revolution. A lot of these people who went through the psychedelic revolution ended up in India, and I met many of them in the following years, 1970, 71, 72. In the Orient, a lot of young people wandering around looking for some kind of purpose or some way of having a different lifestyle that their parents had, because their parents were stuck in the old paradigm, and they saw something better. If you're listening, take a breath, let it go. Take another one. In his next statement, Patanjali mentions that there are 5 kinds of mental processes or modifications which are either painful or not painful. Now, the word painful or not painful is translated again in slightly different ways by different even scholars from Sanskrit. It's either pleasure or pain. In this case, I'm using a text that is saying painful or not painful. Either you're looking at something and the experience is attractive, you want to have this piece of cake. It looks good, it smells good, I want to taste it, I want to eat it. On the other hand, you might come up against a piece of rotten fruit that smells bad. And say, oh, I don't like that. So it's a pleasure or non-pleasure, it's attractive or it's not attractive. We're into duality with this. And we judge everything we see, we judge all of our experiences. This is good or this is bad. I enjoy this or I don't. I want this or I don't. So it creates a whole process of going into the memory bank and finding memorable experiences and wanting to reproduce them, looking at all of the experiences we're having now and comparing them to these past things. That was fun. I think I want to do it again. I remember the taste of this. I think I'm going to go to that restaurant and have it. So it creates this desire phenomena from memory for the pleasurable things. And for the other things that we have an aversion to, I didn't like that. I don't want to have that experience again. These are ongoing. Your mind is processing this all the time. The judgments are there with everything you see, everything you hear, touch, feel, taste. It's the reality of how the mind is working. And Patanjali is pointing this out. The judgment of things. Of the 5 different mental activities, each of them is judged good or bad. I like it, I don't like it. Now we'll go into the modifications or the activities of the mind, the types of processing that is going on